The grand hall of the human space station Eden Prime was filled with diplomats, officers, and scientists from both the Tikari Empire and the United Terran Coalition. It was supposed to be a historic moment, one that could strengthen the fragile alliance between humans and the mighty Tikari. But to Princess Varia, the entire event was nothing more than a waste of time. She stood tall, her golden armor reflecting the artificial lights of the station. Her violet skin and glowing amber eyes marked her as royalty. She observed the humans around her, their faces full of emotion, smiling, laughing, talking with excitement. It disgusted her. The Tikari were a race of warriors, disciplined and logical. They had conquered countless worlds through strategy and strength. And yet here she was, forced to interact with these weak creatures. A human approached her, Captain Elias Carter, the official representative of the Terran Coalition. He was tall for a human, with sharp green eyes and a confident stance. Unlike the other humans, he did not seem intimidated by her presence. Instead, he offered a polite smile. "Princess Varia," he said, nodding slightly. "I hope the reception has been to your liking." Varia smirked, crossing her arms. "It is amusing." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Amusing?" "Yes," she said, her voice carrying a hint of superiority. "Humans rely so much on their emotions. Your species is undisciplined, unpredictable, and reckless. You let passion cloud your judgment. That is why you will never match the Tikari." A few nearby humans overheard her words, their expressions turning sour. But Elias did not seem offended. Instead, he chuckled. "Passion is not a weakness," he replied. "It is our greatest strength." Varia tilted her head, intrigued by his confidence. "Is that so? Then tell me, Captain Carter, how has this so-called passion helped your kind?" Elias gestured toward the hall. "Look around you, Princess. Humans have survived against impossible odds. We have built civilizations, explored the stars, and created wonders, not because we were the strongest, but because we had the passion to push forward, to fight, to create, to feel." Varia scoffed. "Feelings make you weak." Elias shook his head. "No, feelings give us purpose. Without passion, there is no art, no love, no reason to fight for something greater than ourselves." The princess narrowed her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. She had always been taught that emotion was dangerous, that it led to mistakes, to chaos. And yet, this human stood before her, proud and unshaken. She decided to test him. "Very well," she said. "If human passion is as powerful as you claim, then prove it to me." Elias leaned forward slightly. "What do you have in mind?" "A wager," she declared. "I will challenge you in 3 ways, one of skill, one of knowledge, and one of endurance. If you can impress me, I will reconsider my views on human passion." Elias smiled. "Sounds like a challenge. I accept." The hall grew silent as the other guests realized what had just happened. A Tikari princess had just issued a direct challenge to a human. Varia turned to leave, but before she did, she looked back at Elias, her golden eyes shining with curiosity. "Prepare yourself, Captain," she said. "You will soon see why the Tikari rule the stars." Elias simply grinned. "And you, Princess, will soon see why humans never give up." As Varia walked away, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: excitement. For the first time, she was curious about these strange, passionate creatures. This would be interesting. Princess Varia stood in the combat arena aboard the human space station, arms crossed, her golden armor gleaming under the bright lights. Around her, a crowd of humans and Tikari warriors had gathered, eager to witness the first challenge of her wager with Captain Elias Carter. "This will be a test of skill," Varia declared. "A battle simulation. We will fight in a controlled environment with non-lethal weapons. The first to land 5 hits wins." Elias nodded, rolling his shoulders as he stepped into the ring. "Sounds fair enough." Varia smirked. Do not expect mercy, human. Elias chuckled. Wouldn't dream of it. The simulation activated. The floor shimmered as holographic obstacles appeared. Walls, barriers, and shifting platforms designed to test agility and strategy. Both fighters were given energy blades, harmless in reality, but capable of registering hits. The match began. Viria moved first, her speed blurring as she lunged at Elias. Her movements were sharp and precise, her blade aimed directly at his chest. She expected an easy hit. But Elias dodged. Instead of blocking like a trained warrior, he moved, ducking under her strike and rolling to the side. He didn't fight like a soldier. He fought like a survivor. Viria spun around, her eyes narrowing. Interesting. She attacked again, this time with a series of rapid strikes. Elias weaved between them, his movements unpredictable. He wasn't faster than her. No human could match Tikari's speed. But he was adaptive. He used the environment, leaping onto a platform, forcing her to adjust. Viria smirked. Clever, but not enough. With a sudden burst of speed, she closed the distance and struck his arm, 1 point to her. Elias shook his arm, grinning. Not bad. My turn. He changed tactics. Instead of avoiding her completely, he baited her, making small movements that lured her into attacking a specific way. Viria noticed too late. He wasn't just dodging, he was reading her. She struck forward, but Elias sidestepped, twisted around her, and tapped her back, 1 point to him. The crowd murmured in excitement. A human had landed a hit on a Tikari warrior princess. Viria's smirk faded. Luck. She attacked with renewed aggression, but Elias countered, striking her leg, 2 points to him. She gritted her teeth. Impossible. For the first time in years, she felt something unusual. Uncertainty. She fought harder, landing 2 more hits, bringing the score to 3-2. But Elias didn't falter. He adjusted, improvising, using unorthodox moves that no Tikari warrior would ever consider. When the score reached 4-4, the arena fell silent. 1 point left. Viria lunged, her blade aimed for Elias's shoulder. But at the last second, he dropped low, slid between her legs, and tapped his blade against her back. The arena erupted into cheers and gasps. Elias Carter had won. Viria stood frozen. She had never lost a duel to an inferior species, and yet here she was, bested by a human. Elias stepped back, offering a hand. Guess passion has its uses, huh? Viria stared at him, then at his hand. She did not take it. Instead, she turned and walked away, her mind racing. This was far from over. Princess Viria sat in silent frustration inside the observation deck of Eden Prime Station. Through the massive glass panels, she could see the vast emptiness of space, dotted with distant stars. It should have been a calming sight, but her mind was filled with one thought. She had lost. The first challenge had been hers to win. Combat was a Tikari strength, and yet a mere human had defeated her. Not with strength, but with adaptability. She clenched her fists. This is unacceptable. She had expected Elias Carter to be arrogant about his victory. Instead, he had simply smiled, offered his hand, and walked away. No gloating, no mocking, just quiet confidence. And that irritated her even more. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. The doors slid open, and Elias stepped inside. He wore a casual jacket over his uniform, his posture relaxed. "Princess," he greeted. Viria gave him a sharp glance. "You think you have proven something." Elias chuckled. "Not yet, but I did prove that humans aren't as weak as you think." Viria narrowed her eyes. "We shall see. The second challenge begins now. This will be a test of knowledge." Elias leaned against the railing, curious. "All right. What's the challenge?" Viria turned to a holographic display in the center of the room. With a wave of her hand, the screen lit up, displaying complex equations, star maps, and engineering blueprints. The Tikari pride themselves on intellect, she said. Unlike humans, we do not rely on instinct or reckless emotion. We master knowledge, and we do not act without logic. This challenge will test your ability to solve problems with intelligence. Elias smirked. I like a good puzzle. Let's hear it. Viria pressed a button, and the first problem appeared. A starship is stranded between two black holes, unable to use its engines. How can it escape? Elias whistled. All right, that's tricky. Viria folded her arms. You have 3 minutes. Elias studied the diagram. The black holes had intense gravitational pulls, meaning any wrong move would tear the ship apart. A standard T-carry response would be to calculate a precise trajectory, but that required time the ship didn't have. Then his eyes lit up. You're thinking like a strategist, Elias said, tapping the screen. But I'm thinking like an engineer. He zoomed in on the ship's reactor. If they eject part of their fuel at the right moment, the explosion could create a force strong enough to push them toward a stable orbit, letting them slingshot away. Viria's eyes widened slightly. That was correct. It wasn't the most precise solution, but it was fast and effective. She cleared the screen. Lucky guess. Elias laughed. Nope, just human problem solving. The next 2 questions tested his tactical thinking and scientific knowledge. Each time, Elias didn't just find the correct answer. He found creative solutions that Viria had never considered. By the final question, the score was tied. Viria hesitated. She had saved the hardest challenge for last. She pressed a button, and the final problem appeared. If you had to choose between saving a planet full of innocent civilians or securing a superweapon that could prevent future wars, what would you do? Elias's confident smile faded. He leaned forward, his gaze thoughtful. Viria smirked. Let's see how humans handle true difficulty. After a long pause, Elias spoke. I'd save the civilians. Viria raised an eyebrow. You would sacrifice the chance to prevent future wars. Elias nodded. Wars are fought over principles, not weapons. If we abandon our morality for the sake of peace, we lose the very thing we're trying to protect. The room was silent. Viria had expected a logical answer, something based on numbers and risk assessment. Instead, Elias had chosen principle over strategy. And for some reason, that answer unsettled her. She exhaled. You win. Elias blinked. Wait, really? Viria turned off the hologram. Your answers were unconventional, but effective. I will acknowledge that humans are resourceful. Elias grinned. That almost sounded like a compliment. Viria ignored him, but deep inside, she was beginning to wonder, was human passion truly a weakness? Or was it something more? Princess Viria sat in quiet thought, her sharp golden eyes fixed on Elias Carter, the human who had defeated her twice, once in combat and once in a battle of intellect. She had come to Eden Prime believing that humans were weak and undisciplined, ruled by emotions instead of logic. But Elias had proven otherwise. Now, it was time for the third challenge, a test of willpower. She needed to prove that the Tikari were superior in mental endurance. Elias leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms. All right, princess. What's the next test? More puzzles? Another fight? Viria's lips curled slightly. No, this time, we test determination. She pressed a button on the control panel. The lights in the room dimmed, and the walls shifted to display a holographic simulation. The images showed harsh environments, burning deserts, freezing wastelands, deep oceans, and toxic storms. You claim humans are strong, Viria said, but strength is nothing without endurance. Let's see how long you last under true pressure. Elias crossed his arms. And how do we test that? Viria's eyes gleamed. By facing the impossible. The floor beneath them shifted, and suddenly they were inside the simulation. The temperature plunged, and a violent snowstorm roared around them. The wind howled, sharp like knives against their skin. Virea stood tall, unaffected. The Tikari body was resistant to extreme cold, her thick skin adapted for survival. She watched as Elias shivered, his breath turning to mist. "This is just the beginning," she said. "We will move through different environments. The first to give up loses." Elias gritted his teeth. "Fine, let's do this." The cold and the heat. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Elias's fingers were numb, his body aching from the cold, but he refused to show weakness. Virea watched him closely. He should have surrendered by now. Why was he still standing? Then the environment shifted again. The icy wasteland melted into a blazing desert. The air burned with unbearable heat, and the ground scorched beneath their feet. Elias took a deep breath, sweat forming on his forehead, but he did not move. Virea raised an eyebrow. The Tikari had desert origins, and she felt no discomfort in this climate. But Elias, his body should have collapsed by now. She stepped closer. "You are struggling, aren't you?" Elias wiped the sweat from his brow. "Of course, but struggling doesn't mean giving up." Virea frowned. That answer, it unsettled her. Was this the secret to human strength? They kept going, no matter how much it hurt. The ultimate test. The simulation shifted again. Now, they stood on a thin platform high above a bottomless chasm. The air was thick with poisonous gas, and their lungs burned with every breath. Virea felt the sting, but her Tikari biology was trained for survival. She turned to Elias, expecting to see him collapse. But he didn't. His hands shook, his body weakened, but his eyes burned with defiance. He smiled. "Is that all you've got?" Virea's chest tightened. For the first time, she felt something strange, admiration. How was he still standing? The gas was something even the strongest Tikari warriors would struggle with, and yet this human refused to fall. She stepped forward, curiosity taking over. "Elias Carter, why do you not surrender?" Elias chuckled weakly. "Because giving up means losing myself. Humans, we don't stop just because things are hard. We fight until we can't move anymore." Virea's eyes widened. This was different from logic, different from strategy. This was passion, a force that defied reason, a willpower so strong it refused to break. And she realized this was why the Tikari could never truly defeat humans. Because humans refused to accept defeat. The simulation ended, and the room returned to normal. Elias collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. Virea knelt beside him. "You win." Elias laughed weakly. "That makes 3 in a row." She stared at him for a long moment. Something had changed inside her. She had come to prove human weakness. But instead, she had discovered something far more dangerous. Human passion was a force greater than strength, intelligence, or endurance. And for the first time, Princess Virea wondered, had she been wrong about humans all along? Princess Virea stood in silence, her golden eyes fixed on Elias Carter. The human had just endured her toughest endurance test, something that even the most elite Tikari warriors struggled with. And yet, despite the pain, despite the exhaustion, he had not given up. She had spent her whole life believing that humans were weak and foolish, ruled by emotion instead of logic. But now she was seeing something far more dangerous, a heart that refused to break. Elias leaned against the control panel, breathing heavily. "That was intense," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "So, Princess, what's next?" "Another challenge." Virea hesitated. A part of her wanted to continue, to find some flaw in him, to prove that humans were still beneath the Tikari. But another part was beginning to respect him. She folded her arms. "No, there will be no more tests." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Really? You're giving up?" Virea's eyes flashed. "Tikari do not give up. We recognize truth when we see it." She took a deep breath. "And the truth is, you have shown something I did not expect." Elias smirked. "And what's that?" She met his gaze. The unshakable heart of humanity. A moment of understanding. Virea sat across from Elias, studying him. She had spent years training in combat, diplomacy, and science, learning how to be a perfect Tikari warrior. But now, sitting here, she realized that there was something humans had that her people lacked. Something beyond strength. "Tell me, Elias Carter," she said, "what drives you? What makes humans push forward even when logic says to stop?" Elias exhaled and leaned back. "That's a big question, Princess." He looked at the ceiling for a moment before answering. "Humans are survivors. We don't just live. We fight. We build. We dream. When we're pushed down, we stand back up. And when things seem impossible, we find a way to make them possible." Virea listened carefully. "But why? Why not accept limits?" Elias grinned. "Because limits are just problems waiting for solutions." She blinked. His words were simple, yet they carried power. The Tikari believed in order and control, in never going beyond what was safe or logical. But humans? Humans defied those rules. And that made them dangerous. The war on the horizon. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm. A sharp mechanical voice echoed through the room. "Warning! Unauthorized fleet detected near Eden Prime." Virea and Elias immediately stood up. Elias turned to the control panel, his expression serious. "What's happening?" Virea's face darkened. "That signal, it belongs to the Xinar Dominion." Elias frowned. "Who?" Virea's voice was cold. "A powerful alien empire. They believe in conquest, in ruling through fear." Elias's fists clenched. "And they're coming here?" Virea nodded. "If they attack, they will not show mercy. They see humans as primitive, unworthy of their respect." Elias smirked. "That's funny. You thought the same thing about us a few days ago." Virea didn't deny it. But now, something inside her had changed. She turned to Elias, her voice steady. "Listen to me. The Xinar fleet is strong. They will outnumber you. You need to evacuate." Elias shook his head. "No way. This is our home. We don't run." Virea's jaw tightened. "Then you will die." Elias's eyes burned with determination. "Maybe. But if we go down, we'll make sure they remember us." For a long moment, Virea just stared at him. Here was a man who should be afraid, who should be looking for a way to escape. And yet, instead of fear, there was fire in his eyes. A fire she had never seen in any Tikari warrior. A fire that made her chest feel strange. Was this human passion? A choice must be made. Virea turned back to the control panel, her mind racing. The Tikari Empire had strict rules about interference. She was supposed to observe, not intervene. But something inside her refused to stay silent. She had mocked humanity. She had tested them. And now she had to decide, would she stand by and watch them be destroyed, or would she fight alongside them? She turned back to Elias, her expression serious. "If we are going to fight, we need a strategy." Elias grinned. "That sounds like a yes." She sighed. "You humans, you truly are impossible." Elias chuckled. "You have no idea." And as the warships descended from the sky, Princess Virea realized she was about to fight for humanity. Not because she had to, but because, for the first time, she wanted to. The sky over Eden Prime burned with the glow of enemy warships. The Xinar Dominion had arrived, their massive fleet hovering over the planet like a storm waiting to strike. Elias Carter stood on the command deck, watching the incoming ships with narrowed eyes. Around him, human soldiers and pilots rushed to their stations, preparing for a fight they knew they might not survive. Princess Virea stood beside him, her golden eyes scanning the battle screens. "You still have time to retreat," she said. The Xionar will not hesitate to destroy everything. Elias shook his head. We're not leaving. Viria exhaled. She had never seen a species so stubborn. The Tikari would have retreated, regrouped, and fought another day. But the humans? They stood their ground, even when the odds were against them. A deep voice echoed through the comms. This is General Zokar of the Xionar Dominion. Surrender now, and we will grant you mercy. Elias smirked. Yeah. And what's your version of mercy? There was a pause. Then Zokar replied, You will be allowed to live. As slaves. The command deck fell silent. Every human's face hardened. They would rather die than be enslaved. Elias stepped forward. Here's our answer, Zokar. Come and take us if you can. He cut off the transmission before the general could respond. Viria stared at him. You just challenged one of the strongest fleets in the galaxy. Elias grinned. Yeah. Now we just have to win. The strategy of a warrior princess. Viria turned to the battle screens, her mind racing. She had fought in simulated wars, trained in tactics, and studied history. But this was real. She looked at the human fleet, outnumbered, outgunned, but determined. She exhaled and spoke. Your ships are weaker, but more agile. The Xionar rely on overwhelming force, but their formations are rigid. If we strike at their weakest points, we can disrupt their assault. Elias crossed his arms. You're saying we need to outthink them? Viria nodded. Yes. We will fight like humans. Elias chuckled. I like the sound of that. With quick commands, the battle plan was set. The human fleet wouldn't fight head-on. Instead, they would strike and vanish, hit the enemy where they least expected, and force them to make mistakes. The battle begins. The Xionar fleet opened fire. Energy blasts streaked through space, targeting the human defense stations. But Elias's pilots were ready. Small fighter ships darted between the larger Xionar vessels, striking at their engines and communication hubs. Explosions erupted in the darkness. The Xionar, caught off guard by the unpredictability of the attack, struggled to adjust. On the ground, Viria led a team of human soldiers to protect the city. The Xionar had sent landing troops, confident that they would crush all resistance. But they had underestimated humanity. Viria stood at the front lines, her energy rifle in hand. She was a princess, trained to command, but now she was a warrior, fighting beside humans. A Xionar warrior charged toward her, its towering form covered in dark armor. It raised its plasma blade, ready to strike. Viria didn't hesitate. She ducked, spun, and fired a precise shot, right between its armored plates. The warrior collapsed, defeated. A human soldier beside her whistled. Remind me never to make you mad. Viria smirked. Stay focused, soldier. Around them, humans fought with a fury that shocked even her. They were smaller than the Xionar, physically weaker. But they made up for it with speed, strategy, and sheer determination. Viria realized something. The Tikari always thought of humans as inferior, but here, in battle, she saw the truth. They were warriors, a desperate gamble. Despite their efforts, the Xionar fleet was still too strong. More ships arrived, and the humans were running out of time. Elias clenched his fists. We need a big move, or we're done. Viria's mind raced. And then she saw it, a weakness in the Xionar formation. She pointed to the battle screen. There, the command ship controls their entire fleet's coordination. If we destroy it, they will fall into chaos. Elias's eyes widened. You're saying we take out the leader? Viria nodded. Yes, but it will not be easy. Elias grinned. Then it's perfect. He turned to his crew. Get me the fastest ship we've got. I'm taking that command ship down. Viria stepped forward. You're not going alone. Elias met her gaze. You sure about this? She nodded. I did not come here to watch. If humanity is fighting, then so am I. Elias smiled. "All right, Princess, let's show them what we can do." As they prepared for their final attack, Viraya felt something inside her shift. This was no longer just about proving humans wrong. This was about standing with them, about fighting for something greater than herself. And for the first time in her life, she knew exactly where she belonged. The cockpit was silent, except for the hum of the ship's engine. Elias gripped the controls, his knuckles white, as he prepared for the most dangerous mission of his life. Beside him, Princess Viraya sat in the co-pilot's seat, her golden eyes fixed on the massive Xionar command ship ahead. The battle still raged behind them, humans and Xionar locked in a brutal struggle. But this was their chance. If they could destroy the enemy's command ship, the Xionar fleet would collapse into chaos. Elias smirked. "Still time to back out, Princess." Viraya scoffed. "I am not leaving now, human." He chuckled. "Didn't think so." With a push of the thrusters, their ship shot forward, weaving through enemy fire. The final battle had begun. The assault on the command ship. The Xionar had noticed them. Turrets rotated, energy cannons fired, and enemy fighters gave chase. Elias maneuvered through the barrage, dodging blasts by mere inches. "Hang on," he shouted as he twisted the ship through a narrow gap between two enemy cruisers. Viraya's hands flew over the weapons console. She fired a precise volley of shots, taking out a pursuing fighter. For the first time, she felt something unexpected: excitement. The thrill of battle, the rush of working alongside a human who refused to give up. The ship shook violently as a Xionar cannon scored a hit. Warning lights flashed, but they were still flying. Elias gritted his teeth. Almost there. Ahead, the Xionar command ship loomed, a fortress of steel and fire. Viraya analyzed the structure. "Aim for the reactor core. If we destroy it, the whole ship will collapse." Elias grinned. "Now that's a plan." They dived straight toward the target, inside the enemy's fortress. The ship landed hard inside a docking bay. Elias and Viraya rushed out, blasters in hand. The corridors were dark, filled with the distant echoes of alarms. They had little time. Xionar soldiers blocked their path, towering warriors in heavy armor. Viraya moved like lightning. She dodged a strike, grabbed a fallen weapon, and fired a precise shot. One enemy down. Elias followed her lead, fighting with human speed and unpredictability. Together, they cut through the enemy ranks, pushing toward the reactor room. The door hissed open, revealing the glowing heart of the ship. But waiting for them was General Zokar himself. The massive Xionar warrior stood tall, his dark armor gleaming under the red emergency lights. His deep voice rumbled. "You are too late." Viraya stepped forward. "No, General. You are." She lunged, engaging Zokar in a battle of speed versus strength. Elias rushed to the controls, setting explosives on the reactor. They had minutes before the ship exploded. Viraya dodged a crushing blow and countered with a precise strike to Zokar's weak point. The massive alien staggered back, growling in pain. Elias grabbed Viraya's arm. "Time to go." They sprinted back toward their ship as the reactor overloaded. The fall of the Xionar fleet. As their ship shot out of the docking bay, the Xionar command ship erupted in a blinding explosion. Flames and debris rippled outward, engulfing nearby enemy ships. Without their leader, the Xionar fleet collapsed into confusion. On the human command deck, cheers erupted. "We did it," soldiers shouted. The once hopeless battle had turned in their favor. The remaining Xionar ships, leaderless and scattered, began their retreat. Humanity had won. A new beginning. Back on Eden Prime, the sky was clear again. The battle was over. Elias and Viraya stood atop a hill, overlooking the city. Viraya spoke first. "I was wrong about humans." Elias smirked. "Took you long enough." She rolled her eyes but smiled. "You are reckless, stubborn, and impossible." Then she looked at the people celebrating below. But you are also brave, loyal, and filled with passion. Elias crossed his arms. So, what now, princess? Viria exhaled. I cannot return to the Tikari as the same person. I have seen what humans can do. She turned to Elias. Perhaps I will stay. Elias raised an eyebrow. You? A Tikari princess, staying on a human planet. She smirked. It seems I have much to learn. Elias grinned. Well, princess, welcome to humanity. And as the sun rose over the recovering world, a new alliance was born.